Hey guys, and welcome to Weekly Property News. Today's Monday the 19th of January, and I'm Brett Alegre-Wood. Okay, so today what we're going to cover is who's the property expert, who's the real property expert, okay, and we'll look at an example or a story about that. We're going to look at the surge in interest in property inquiries as prices bottom out and optimism returns, okay. We're going to look at the every person house rule and how it's really hit home to me this weekend, and certainly to a number of people, and I'll explain a bit more later. And also the fact that the market could rise by the end of 2009. So, that'll be great news for all of us as investors. My thoughts for the week, the government's putting some real money into the banks, okay, and that's going to shore things up and get the money flowing in. That's the whole purpose around this. People realise that they still have to provide their pension and that prices are much, much more affordable. The affordability indexes are coming down and that becomes more attractive to people. We'll talk more about that. Okay, so let's take a look. Alright, so who's the real property expert? This is a blog that I wrote. It was a story that I knew quite a bit about. Went to lunch with one of our brokers and they were telling us about a property expert who actually had bought over 100 properties. Now you look at someone who's got 100 properties and you might immediately think, wow, this guy is an expert. In truth, this person had those 100 properties for about 4 years. Okay. Now the problem was, and how they fell over and actually end up going bankrupt and end up going overseas was quite simply because they didn't allow for the cash flow to change. Interest rates rose, they couldn't afford those 100 properties. They didn't foresee this, or they relied on buying stuff with cashbacks and putting those cashbacks into funding the thing. Big mistake, big mistake. And I make the point down the bottom of the blog that basically a person who's held 2 properties, for 10 years is a much more worthy of being an expert than someone who's held 100 properties for 4 years. So something to keep in mind as you're listening to, perceived property experts. Okay, great. All right, so let's look at property websites here. Activity surge in the UK. A Rightmove, 429,560 in the 4 weeks to January 10th, as opposed to last year, which was around 200,000. Now, believe it or not, Your Property Club, our website, is actually seeing the same things. Massive amount of people. Our leads have jumped incredibly. Okay, it seems that people are starting to realise that, hey, they've still got to do their pension. They've got to look after it. Another thing, inquiries up, but house sales hit new low. Okay, so the sales aren't going through. Rick Spokesman, Ian Penry, said buyer interest is now at a level not seen since 2006. But without mortgage finance, the housing market is at a standstill and transactions level at an all-time low. Okay. Now, interesting, supply and demand. The demand's there. It's just that can't be fulfilled. Okay, because they can't get mortgages. As soon as those mortgages come back, that's when I think we'll see this market turn around. Okay. So really, we're waiting with bated breath. Now, importantly, anyone can get a mortgage, okay? We're still doing our normal volumes, getting mortgages, no problem whatsoever. Obviously, you need a bigger deposit to put in, which is fine. But as long as you've got that deposit, then no problems. The mortgages are there, okay? Certainly, first-time buyers are struggling. They'll come back into the market a little bit later on. All right, so property market. Top houses take a tumble, all right? Now, if any of you know about my every person house rule, it quite simply means we don't buy where poor people live, we don't buy where rich people live. Okay? Poor people don't pay the rent on time, they don't look after the place, and generally they're not the sort of tenants we want in our house. Okay? Rich people, and this is the point that I'm making now, okay, because normally everyone can associate with poor people. When I mention rich people, I say the problem is when times are good, they live in nice houses, big houses, pay exorbitant rents, all that. Okay? But when times are tough, they go live with every person house. Now, the prices in the upper echelon, we're talking about 1.85 million to 5 million, the story talks about, but generally over 2 million in prime London, which they call prime London property, taking a tumble. And, in some cases, 30-40% drops, okay? Massive drops. And that market gets hit very hard, all right, because of this every person house type thing. All right, now, importantly, we went to get a house on the weekend. And the actual the bid that we actually offered was about 50% below what we actually the bid that we offered was 50% what was being advertised, and it was accepted. And I was so impressed at how much I thought there'd be some heaps of negotiation. There wasn't. There was an acceptance. The place had been void for 3 months. It'd been sitting there. So it's really, really important to realise that if you're buying at that top end, the rich end of the market, then when times are tough, you're going to feel it, okay? When the lower end of the market, you're going to feel it because they're not going to look after the house. You really want to get in that every person house, okay? Which is, something that you're going to have tenable all the time. Okay. House prices could start to rise by the end of 2009. All right. What they're talking about here is the Telegraph Housing Affordability Index. Okay, shows that house prices are now moving back into the affordability territory, which means that people based on their income can borrow for the mortgage and get the mortgage and therefore buy, which will create demand. Okay, the supply is still lagging. As soon as the demand comes back, then that'll push the price back. Now, obviously, mortgages are a problem now. Again, once that comes back, then the natural dynamics of the market will take over. Okay. Right, okay, so my thoughts for the day, or my thoughts for the week actually. Alright, so government putting some real money into the banks, and we'll talk about this is one of the stories I want to tackle next week, okay, and it'll be our main story about, they're looking at £200 billion pumping into the banks to shore them up, get them moving, okay, guaranteeing investors such as hedge funds and all sorts of pension funds so they can invest back into the mortgage-based securities. Okay, we'll talk a bit more about that next week, but this is vital to get the funds flowing again. All right, people realise they still have to provide for a pension. What I'm hearing from a lot of our clients is that they're realising that, hey, it doesn't matter about all this credit crunch and whether they get mortgages or not. The fact is, if they don't secure their pension, then they're not retiring. Okay, so it's vitally important. I think with the January and New Year's resolutions and all those sort of things, people are realising that it doesn't matter about all the stuff that's going on. Personally, they still have to do something, and that's the question that I've got for you guys this week: is what are you doing about your pension? Are you really taking the steps that you need to get sorted? Okay, and importantly, the final point: prices are much more affordable. Okay, to give you an idea, a £160,000 flat. All right. 2007, that's what they were selling for, and that's what people were paying for them. Now valued 110, so 50 grand drop. All right, almost a 30% drop. Okay, now this is a city centre flat, come down to 110. I bought it for £86,000, £86,000, which is almost half price. Okay, now the great thing is, some people are saying, well, city centre flats, oh, how could you do that? Well, if I'm paying 50% on what they were paying back then, you better believe I'm doing it. I'll do that every day of the week. Cool. All right, so fantastic. Thanks to have you, and we'll see you next week.